Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. My name is Steve Torsa. I'm the founder of Wholesale Investor. I'd like to welcome everyone to come here today. So today brings us to the 7th edition of Emergence. It's one of those funny things for us as a company. We've hosted a lot of events throughout our time, but Emergence has basically taken on a life of its own. And it's something that's become special to us as a company. And this year is quite unique in that not only are we doing it in Australia, but we're also going to be hosting Emergence across Singapore and also the UK as well for the first time since 2019. Now, typically for the last couple of years when I've been hosting events, I've been talking about all the fear that's actually been taking place in the market. And it was pretty much all around the different sentiment that everyone was communicating at that time. This year, from our side, marks a transition in that. And if you're at my recent meetup, you would know how different that is to what it looks like from our perspective going forward and how we see things. We've done our best over the last 6 months to curate and shape a range of keynote speakers and panel session that speaks to the opportunity that comes to all of us over the next 3 to 5 years in this ecosystem. We know that there's a lot of ups and downs. The last 2 years have been mostly downs, except for high yield opportunities and climate tech, and now obviously in the last 12 months sort of AI. But what's been really interesting for me is that I can see now you've got that vision, you've got that sort of foundation of what comes next. So one of the things in the meetups that I talked about was the actual founder sentiment and the investor sentiment, the stuff that no one really wants to sort of talk about too openly. I mentioned that founders have felt beaten up, they were tired, they were burnt out, but yet they were still optimistic. And I'll explain why in my presentation. On the investor side, I know all of you have had would have had different challenges in your portfolio unless you cashed out at the end of 2021, right? Whether it be the problematic companies, whether it be the portfolios going down for a period, but you're also still optimistic about what comes next over the next sort of couple years. These next 2 days are about the era of abundance. And in my presentation, I'm going to talk about what we see as the foundational elements that are coming together to actually create that. And likewise, as I said, we have curated these panel sessions and the keynotes specifically to actually speak to that. Now, from a logistics perspective, when it's today, we're going to have 3 different networking breaks. We have got loads of time for networking. I know our audience loves to network. We have actually got 2 exhibition areas. In the exhibition areas are all the companies that are going to be featuring, going to be presenting today. I strongly encourage that when you go and speak to those companies, have a conversation with one lens. One, your own personal ambitions about what you're looking for, either from an investment perspective or strategic opportunity perspective. And then the other lens is who could this opportunity be relevant to in your network? I know that every single one of you will have anywhere between 10 to 15 people in your in your networks that are involved in this space, that are passionate about it, and that can make a difference to some of the companies. This space has grown by the indirect networking, right? And I see that over and over again. One of the companies that is featured here today, after the last event they attended, within a week they were speaking to a UK billionaire because of an introduction from one of our events. These are the small things that we hear about time and time again. Now, I'll also highlight that each day has its own different set of companies. So the companies that are exhibiting today in day 1 will not be there in day 2. We'll have a different set of companies in there for day 2. Likewise, I'll have a different introductory talk from my side for day 2 as well, talking about some other key things that we're focused on. With the 3 breaks, I just ask one thing as an event organizer. Make it easy for us to get you back in the room, right? Because I know the networking we've got plenty of time for networking, whether it be through the 3 different sessions or even the drinks at the end tomorrow night. We've done everything to make it so that, number 1, we want to place a spotlight on the companies that are featured today, right? And we want to give you the opportunity to listen to what they're talking about and access them. So make sure, help us from the event organized perspective of just coming in the room when we sort of make the announcement to come in. As I said, we want to make sure that every company gets to have their own sort of spotlight for the event. Now, as far as from the other thing I'll mention is that, oh, hang on, no, I've already mentioned that. 1 second. Now I'll actually go to my presentation. So the first part is I want to say a big thank you to our sponsors. The first one I'll say is Pacific Channel. You're going to actually hear from the Pacific Channel today. The first time we worked with Pacific Channel was back in 2013 when they brought us a New Zealand company called Engender. And I tell you what, we're now fortunate enough to work with several of the NZ VCs. There is some incredible innovation coming out of NZ, some great people, great companies, global scalable potential, and dare I say it, their valuations are, let's say, more friendly for an Australian audience than what people may normally experience, right? So just keep a lookout for that, and I'll mention some of the NZ companies today. But Pacific Channel, that first example we got, the investors from WI that participated in that deal did incredibly well. In fact, Pacific Channel have done well. They started out as an advisory firm, and then they've now built themselves to be not only a fund manager, but also a investment banking operation as well, and are one of the sort of standouts as far as building in the NZ ecosystem. So make sure you chat to the Pacific Channel team today as well. Going to be talking about BetterX. We've got an announcement coming up with them. So they're building a crypto trading platform specifically for companies that deal with in the wealth management space, as well as high net worths and family offices as well, with institutional grade security. Incredible team behind it. Calvin from Aura Funds Management. They've got rich listers backing them. And then I just found personally, dealing with Eric is one of the most efficient people I've worked with. We're fortunate enough to have Ansarada here as well. All of you would have seen Sam's announcement recently about Ansarada going through a trade sale to Insight. I'm super happy for him as a company. Ansarada is an Australian tech success story that very few people talk about in that light. But to go from a startup to selling for 260 million, they're their own success story. And what Sam doesn't know or hasn't seen about deals, very few people would have. Invest HK. One of the things working with the Invest HK team, someone like Luca, they are so passionate about helping Australian companies succeed in Hong Kong, both for the fund managers here, right, and also the companies as well. They know that they want to actually help companies rediscover the potential of Hong Kong, and so they're going to be doing a presentation today to talk about that. And then the last one I'm going to mention is Rocking Horse. If you ever met Giles, he's one of the most laid-back humans I've ever met, but also one of the smartest. Rocking Horse really assists companies in that R&D funding mechanism. And for a lot of companies here that actually do get R&D grants, it really helps them extend their funding runway. So a big thank you to our sponsors, because the reality is without sponsors and without the participating companies, these events just don't happen. So for my presentation, I'm going to start with this slide. See all those little mastheads up there? Remember those? Anyone actually still read a newspaper, an actual physical newspaper? There we go. He's literally got one in his hands. There we go. So I really wanted to highlight a point with this. If you think that classified revenue peaked at 1.7 billion in 2007, right? Those mastheads, for a lot of us, we actually grew up on, right? I remember the Sunday newspaper. I'm sure I used to deliver magazines or pamphlets at a different stage. Oops, I've gone the wrong direction. Within just a few years, within 9 years, only 10% of that revenue, a core feature of that revenue was from classified ads. That revenue quickly shifted to online, within the space of 10 years. And if you think about the S adoption curve when it comes to innovation, it also comes from the business model perspective. Now, what's interesting is if you think about it, the last big transaction in this space was when Fairfax sold to Channel 9 for $4 billion, right? Now, where that actually converted to is effectively those classified ads became Seek, they became car sales, they became REA Group, and they became Domain. In total, $49 billion of value was created, with the last company being sold at $4 billion. So my point in highlighting that is simply this. Innovation first replaces the value of the incumbent, and then it accelerates exponentially past it. We have seen that now a few times, but the internet really brought this fact out, right? That's 10x of what that was before for that specific component. We're absolutely now seeing the destruction of TV, right? Who here actually still watches the mainstream TV channels, out of curiosity, right? Very, very few people compared to beforehand. For me, if you think about the time you spend on the likes of YouTube, Rumble, all sorts of other platforms, is much more significant than what we would, or even just social media in general, than what we would actually spend watching normal Channel 7, Channel 9, Channel 10. But what's interesting is right now, we're actually going through a convergence of different technology platforms. And I mentioned this in my meetup to a much greater detail. Between AI, robotics, energy storage, blockchain, and then DNA sequencing, we are seeing these technologies actually go across different sectors to make a difference. Now, this work has been done by Kathy Wood from ARK Invest. If you don't follow her, I highly recommend it. One of the best things she helped me do was actually be able to articulate what I was actually seeing in a structured format. And that's, said, whilst as an ETF fund manager, her fund goes up and down, we're all seeing this. Each one of us are actually seeing this take place in real time. And one of the comments she's made was that breakthroughs associated with energy storage and robotics alone could add 30% to real GDP by 2030, and AI could dwarf their contributions. So go back to the comment that I mentioned beforehand. So Sundar, in a little bit of heat at the moment, but he made this comment: artificial intelligence technology will be the biggest technological shift in our lifetimes, possibly bigger than the internet itself, right? And whilst people may sit there and think, okay, this is a bubble, this is hype at the moment, when you actually sit there and think about it, you go back and look at the likes of all those mastheads I showed you before, and you look at what they became over a 20-year period. The question is not if, the question is how long. And then the next part is the pace of innovation is accelerating exponentially, and will first replace the value of the internet. And you could even now say the hardware aspects when you look at what's happening with NVIDIA versus Intel as an example, right, from a share price. And then the applications actually built on it. And then it will accelerate exponentially. Let me bring up an example very few would expect at the start of this. There is right now sitting 93 billion in assets under management in gold ETFs that was launched 20 years ago. Bitcoin has always been described as the digital gold, right? This is probably even up now more since. $37 billion now sits in the 11 Bitcoin ETFs that were approved on January 11th this year. I said innovation first replaces the incumbent, and then it accelerates exponentially beyond it. What's even more interesting is right now, like obviously Bitcoin went up last night, it's actually making mainstream again. We haven't even seen the retail investment really come into Bitcoin at the moment. This price drive has been from the institutional side. There is 14 times more money going into these Bitcoin ETFs than what Bitcoin is being mined right now. So the economics of supply and demand lets you know what's going to take place with that going forward. So for me, Emergence is your platform across 2 days to gain insights into the innovation future. And more than that, there's innovation coming across a whole bunch of different ways. I just covered on the fun stuff. But let's talk about some other areas. The Great Succession. Our first keynote today is Stephen from the Valoop Exchange. The Great Succession is one of the biggest wealth transfers that will take place, and a lot of that will happen through the transfer of businesses as baby boomers retire and look to hand over the reins. The expansion of private market opportunities. We were fortunate enough to have PEP at our event in May last year. Cameron sent me a document from the Partners for Growth Network. There was something like 100 plus pages. The opportunity in the private markets is exponentially growing at the moment. And then the last one, you'll notice across Emergence, we've got a range of different credit-related and fund-related opportunities. The rise of non-bank lending has absolutely taken off for a number of reasons. With the Great Succession, 40% of businesses right now are owned by baby boomers. They will go through their transition over the next decade. The expansion of private markets. In 2022, it was $12 trillion. It is expected to grow to 2033 to $30 trillion. It is currently growing at 12% CAGR. And then this last one, the rise of non-bank lending. So for investors that have got interest in growth, you've got that. On the innovation side, on the crypto side, all the different assets, deep tech, etc. For investors that are interested in high yield, which majority of you also have in your portfolio, you've got that as well through these different range of opportunities. So whilst we've had a punishing last 2 years, I could not be more excited about what comes next over the next 2 to 3 years. Yes, there's ups and downs. Yes, there's yes, there's all sorts of different concerns about, politics, wars, all that sort of stuff, interest rates still there. But the reality is this is happening, right, on a number of different ways. And it's one of the greatest opportunities from an investor's perspective to participate in that. So us ourselves, we've got some special announcements. The first one is that the CRISP platform that you're on today, on Friday, it's going to be moved over to the new version of where our direction is, and that is Capital HQ. So CRISP is going to be rebranded to Capital HQ, and that sets in stone the direction for us that we are going to be going forward, which is completely all in on the private markets opportunity side, and obviously all in on the small cap listed side as well. But the private market opportunity side is why I keep on highlighting this. Effectively, the next milestone for us is we want to assist companies to create their deal room within seconds and then be connecting with investors in minutes, and completely removing the sort of dark art aspect to what this space is. And then as part of that, helping companies create their capital raising material that they will use within seconds. Stuff that they spend somewhere between weeks and months on right now. This is our direction going forward. Secondly, we're announcing our partnership with BetterX. Said, I'm a big believer in crypto. We were fortunate enough to work with Independent Reserve in 2013. Independent Reserve did their seed raise in our boardroom in 2013, and they're now one of the leading crypto exchanges. Banxa also did their seed raise with us. They are now one of the largest sort of basically fiat to crypto sort of platforms or onboarding ramps across the actual market, dealing with all the big exchanges. Right? The next stage is the wealth management aspect to it and the access for family offices and high net worths, and this is why we're partnering with BetterX. So you'll see a lot more communications from us around this. Voloop Exchange. Stephen's going to be the first presenter for today. I could not be more excited about the work that we are going to do with Voloop. If you think about that business succession area, they have created a very unique model to actually help founders go through that exit path, but best of all, the way they are doing it is in such a way that employees and management of those companies win. If you think about the journey for someone looking to sell a business right now, they've either typically got a business broker, they're listing via business brokers, or if they're lucky enough to be in that sort of 0.1%, to have sort of PE, private equity knocking on their door, or maybe private investors looking to take over. What they're doing is now empowering management and employees through a very unique platform, and I'll let Stephen talk more about that. So throughout the next 2 days, we've got a beautiful media wall set up around there. Take an absolute ton of photos, put your arm around people, take photos, share it on LinkedIn, share it on Twitter, share it with the hashtag Emergence 2024. Said, these next 2 days are for you, right? We do everything for this. For us, everything is about the connection part. We want to make sure this whole event is as visible as possible on the social media side. So as I mentioned, the keynote speakers, Stephen Greenwood's going to be first from Voloop Exchange. Henrik Anderson, they won the Morningstar Award in 2020. It was either 2020 or 2021. He's one of the top digital asset managers, crypto fund managers in the country. The last 2 times me and him have done interviews with each other, it's gone through a bull run. And the reason is because it's literally the bull run is written into the code of Bitcoin, right? It's written into the blockchain what happens. And I'll let him talk more about that. But to me, I want you to be saying that 2 years from now, that you got to take the advantage of the opportunities that was sort of talked about at this event. We've got 3 panel sessions that really, once again, that I see as being one of the greatest opportunities in this space. The small caps. When Australian small caps are on, you can almost get venture returns with some of the small caps. Imugene, who's presenting today, we worked with them when they're a 20 mil market cap company. They went to as high as $3.5 billion, right? Leslie's phenomenal. That whole area of immunotherapy is something super exciting. We've got companies like Cartharix Emergence presenting to talk about that today. When you do a deep dive on the immunotherapies, it's a super exciting space. Then we've got the venture capital investment trends. That's always a popular session for everyone, and we've obviously got some heavy hitters coming in for that. And then the last one to finish out the day, to make sure that absolutely everyone stays right to the end, is the digital asset investment trends. I'll just say this, that is not a session that any single one of you that have any interest in making money over the next few years will not want to miss. Right? Such an important time for the crypto space. I said, as soon as BlackRock lodged their application for the ETFs, I knew it was on, right? And that's going to be an interesting panel session. So, I'm not going to go through, I've done this before where I try to go through all the companies featured. I'm not going to do that today, but all I'll say is this. Take the time and go and meet every single company presenting today. You've got some incredible New Zealand success stories inside of that. You've got companies like Forrester, right? So working with Ray now for a few years, it's incredible to see how he went from a company in the middle of Queensland to then an ASX listed company, and now working on projects that are in the hundreds of millions of size. Incredible, founder and what he's been able to create over that time period. Obviously, as you know, I'm passionate about all the different life science. Recce's had some big announcements recently. Trade Window I met just within the last week. When you actually see what they're doing, the status that they've been able to achieve that's a New Zealand company as well, what they've been able to achieve, really, really impressive. EBR Systems, since I found out about my son's heart issue, I've had a passionate area around the heart. These guys are moving into commercialization over the next 12 months, and we know what that means for medical device related companies. Also, an incredible Australian success story. The likes of Genius, Emergence, Knightsbridge. Like I said, we've got so many great success stories coming out today. I just saw Sarah's Tag as well. What I couldn't believe, we worked with Sarah's Tag about 2 to 3 years ago. Now they're a global scaling business that have raised, somewhere in the range of sort of $14 to $16 million and actually scaling incredibly well and very well known globally in the sort of ag tech space. We have curated these companies to suit these times, and we have got such incredible companies presenting today. So take the time to go and meet all of them. And on that note, go into the app. We've sent you enough emails about that. All the companies are actually featured in our app. Just go to app.chris.io. Effectively, you get matched with different deals just on the core platform. We'll send more information about that later. But most importantly, you can access all the companies being featured over the next 2 days inside of that. And we've integrated the conference software. I appreciate some of you may have meetings throughout the day. You may sort of come in and out and so forth. That's completely fine. We're actually live streaming this event today as well. The last thing I'm going to finish on, and I'm definitely over time, is this. The power of one conversation is super important for this entire experience. So many times I've seen it where one conversation can change the trajectory of either an investment or an actual company. Do your best to make sure you walk away with that one conversation. So on that note, that's the end of my keynote. I'm going to hand over to Stephen Greenwood from Volloop, and I'll say I won't do too much of an introduction because what he's about to say to me, I think he is solving one of the greatest grey area problems that represents trillions of dollars of wealth that is going to be transferred over the next day. And their perspective on that has absolutely opened my eyes for the opportunity also in the private market space for this next decade as well.